Welcome everybody to another episode of Rainy Day Chat. I am Zachary Whitley Perlmutter, as you probably already know from all the articles that I write on Infinite Rainy Day. I write a lot, and joining me today is our boss, our big kahuna, Jonathan Kaharo. Say hi.
Hello.
How are you doing this fine morning?
Well, I was last week I was sick with stomach flu, so I'm better.
That's wonderful. Stomach flu is not nice.
It's not, especially not nice when instead of diarrhea you get constipation and can't lay down without painkillers.
Okay, TMI.
Yeah, if you're wondering why the first episode took so long to go up and why this one just sort of came up at such a weird time, that's why. I was originally planning to have the first episode with Tom up like a week before this recorded, but that just went right out the window.
Yeah.
I'm still in the middle of recording it, so it's just been one big mess, but everything should hopefully be up soon, and well, now we have two Rainy Day Chat episodes up, both pretty close together, so everyone has a good idea of how this series is going to work.
Yeah. So today's topic is one that I actually hold kind of close to my heart. I had originally discovered this in 2006 through an episode of X-Play, and I eventually got it as a birthday present in 2008 for my Wii. It's Okami, and I happen to really love Okami, which is kind of interesting because I'm not a huge Zelda fan, and we'll get more into that in a bit, but Okami really took me by surprise, and it's funny because I beat it in 2008, but I didn't play it again until like recently, and I was worried it wasn't going to hold up, but it actually does hold up.
Yeah, I kind of have similar feelings towards it myself, though instead of X-Play, which I did watch when I was a kid, I instead learned about it through Play Magazine, which in retrospect was kind of bad because they were like one of the only publications that gave a positive review, like 9.5 to Sonic 06. But they also did a lot of big flashy reviews and cover stories over games that weren't really talked about a lot. I would not have heard of games like Okami or Odin Sphere or even Persona 4 if it wasn't for them just gushing about them all the time, and I think I would have been a very different type of gamer without it.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned magazines because Nintendo Power had been hyping up Okami for like months, and then when it finally got it, the review was a little mixed. And I mean, like, on one hand, I can understand why they would complain about that, but at the same time, Nintendo Power was biased toward Nintendo games. Like, I think they gave a Wii Music a 7 out of 5, 7.5 out of 10. So take that with a grain of salt. I mean, look, I don't think the hate for Wii Music is entirely justified, but again, it's Wii Music.
I remember some of the conversation at like a Game Crazy I used to go to when that game came out, and nobody knew what to make of the game, not even the people working in the store.
Yeah. Just as a side note, I think the real issue with Wii Music isn't that it's stupid, but that it doesn't go and do enough with its premise.
Yeah, it's basically just a family thing to screw around with, not some sort of significant sim or anything.
Yeah. It's just wasted potential. I think that's what the problem was.
I'm trying to remember, did Nintendo Power try to give at least an average review to Geist?
To Geist? I don't remember.
Yeah, remember that god-awful Nintendo exclusive game where the guy is the ghost and possesses dog food to scare dogs?
I don't remember. I sold my Nintendo Power collection recently on Amazon, so...
Oh god, Nintendo Power, it's a blast from the past.
Yeah. But anyway, moving on. I think this is where we start talking about tangentially related materials that pertain to Okami. That was a really weird sentence, but whatever.
Yeah, basically just media we really enjoy that comes to mind when we think of this game.
Yeah.
I kind of, when I was kind of confused with this idea when I did it with Tom, but I think I got it down now, so apologies if Tom just suggested weird stuff for no reason. But anyways, why don't you start us off since this is your pick?
Okay, so I'll start off. I'm going to go with a movie, an anime film, from Isao Takahata called The Tale of the Princess Kaguya. I did a review for it on Infinite Rainy Day way back when the movie came out over here in 2004, I think. And it's actually interesting because, as I said in the review, I'm not a huge Isao Takahata fan compared to other stuff from Studio Ghibli. I find that his movies are slow and draggy and could be trimmed a lot. And The Tale of the Princess Kaguya definitely has those issues, but they're minimal compared to his other stuff because the movie itself is the kind of film where the filler is just as relevant as the main overarching story itself. And for those who don't know, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya is based on the Japanese folk tale of the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter, which also appears as a small little section in Okami. It tells the story of this bamboo cutter who finds a girl in a bamboo stalk, and he raises her with his wife, and he realizes that she might be royalty. So he wants to raise her in the royal palace, and they go to a richer lifestyle, and he asks her to try and marry suitors. She doesn't want to marry suitors. It's a really depressing movie. And in the end, obviously, something happens to Kaguya that I won't ruin, but it has me in tears every time I watch it.
Yeah, I've seen stills of that movie, and I'm really impressed with the art direction.
It's a very, very dour movie, or downer movie, I should say, downer.
Yeah, I could about expect that.
Like, people constantly talk about Grave of the Fireflies being the saddest movie Isao Takahata has ever made. And it is sad. It is sad, but, like, this is sadder. Honestly, in my opinion, it's much sadder. I think, because honestly, I think the Grave of the Fireflies should have been like an hour long. It was a little bit too long, but this one is much more of a reasonable length for what it is. And I mention it because, like I said, the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter is a small side part of Okami. When Isun and Amaterasu are in the Emperor's palace, they discover a woman in a prison cell named Kaguya. They end up freeing her. She goes back to her grandfather, and then she reveals that she's from the moon. And after a mildly annoying minigame section, and we'll cover those minigames in a bit, she ends up going back to the moon. And it was heartbreaking back then, but now that I know about the story of the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter through this movie, it is especially heartbreaking.
I'm not sure what to add. I've been really behind on my Ghibli stuff lately, or just like anime movies in general, because I don't have an easy way to watch them right now. It's a shame because I actually do like Ghibli's works, especially like Princess Mononoke is a genuine personal favorite of mine, but I just haven't been able to watch any modern stuff they've done recently, even though I know there's a lot of really good stuff to look through. Though I'm not sure where The Wind Also Rises falls in that, since it also kind of smells a bit sort of like war propaganda, but that's just what I've heard.
Yeah, The Wind Rises is kind of confusing, but that's for a different day. Do you have a pick?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind when you suggested Okami was a Zelda-like game that I really wanted to mention because it's, despite it being so by mechanical fundamentals Zelda, it's about as far as from Zelda as you can possibly get in every other way. And it's an indie game called Nodine from 2013, made by Shinhan Tane and Joni Kitaka. And it is just one of the most bizarre games I've ever played. And it makes sense that it's like that because the entire aesthetic is based on dreams and meta-narrative. Sort of. It's the sort of game that doesn't explain itself. It casts you as this nerd guy in like a lab coat named Young, who has a broom, who can, like, instead of using it like a sword, he can use it as a basic attack or like to sweep up dust that's all around the world and use it for like platforming puzzles. And every area you go to is very different from the last. The basic overworld is just like a basic little fantasy video game world, like you expect from like any game from the SNES era. But the dungeons are all just bizarre. There's one that looks like some sort of Lovecraftian horror story, and everything is incredibly sad in it. There's some sort of hell circus towards the end. There's a haunted hotel where all the machines are possessed by ghosts, and there's like arsonists on the roof and giant bugs. And there's also, and of course there's also the infamous suburban village that's all in black and white, where strange shadow monsters are just walking around and you don't want to touch them. And it's kind of hinted at through notes you find that there may have been a genocide that happened there. But the thing about the game is it never makes it clear what any of this actually means, and the tone is constantly all over the place. Because like at the haunted hotel level, it's very cartoony, not necessarily scary or threatening in any way. It's just all very like exaggerated and weird, and you're wondering what any of this is doing here. There's a few more jokes than usual. The circus is very basic gimmicky, but it has a more like threatening atmosphere to it. It's sort of like you're traveling through someone's headspace, but you have no context for who that is or what they're like. And even when you get to the final boss, it doesn't really make it that clear what the motivations of anyone in the game actually was, or what your character was actually doing. But there's a lot of hints, and it's fun to try and put them together and try and figure out what all the imagery means.
So when you say it's funny haunted house, it's like haunted in a Scooby-Doo kind of way?
That's a sort of a way to put it. It's just like nothing seems quite right for that setting, but it all fits within that tone, if that makes sense. Like nothing ever really adds up in this game, and it's just very strange to play through. I should mention these guys also made another game recently that you can find on Steam, though I forgot the name of it. I've been meaning to get it, but I have other stuff on my docket right now.
I don't really have a Steam account, so I can't really look for that stuff.
It might be on itch.io, I wouldn't be surprised. And you don't really need an account for that site.
Okay, I mean, if I ever get a chance, I might look it up, but I have a lot of stuff on my plate I need to do with this.
Actually, I think they may have ported Nodine to phone, but I would not advise that, because one major gripe I have with this game is it has a few platforming puzzles, and they're all terrible because they all base themselves around the momentum of your character's running direction, and it just ends up becoming a living hell by the time you get to the last dungeon. But other than that, it's stellar.
So I guess I can go to my second pick now.
Go for it.
It's kind of only loosely related to Okami, and that's Wolf's Rain. And the only real connection that Wolf's Rain has to Okami is that the main characters are wolves.
And the whole folklore focus.
Yeah, but Wolf's Rain is also like this dark fantasy, in a way. It's almost like one of my most popular articles on Infinite Rainy Day is about the ending to Wolf's Rain, and what it means and whatnot. And honestly, the show is not for everybody. Like, there are people who I've heard complain that it's very slow and padding, and the characters don't really change all that much. I know that David had tried it out a while back, and he wasn't impressed with it. Yeah, so that's kind of like my thoughts on that. But I just thought it was interesting to talk about it because the main characters are all wolves, and the main character in Okami is a wolf.
I think there's also the connection of like an environmental bent, because a major theme in Okami is revitalizing nature, and a major theme in Wolf's Rain is reconnecting with nature.
Yeah, I guess that can also work.
Yeah, like their paradise is a natural land, but because they don't really belong in man's world.
Yeah. But that was kind of my touch there.
I really need to check if Wolf's Rain is streaming anywhere, because that's been a show that's been on my to-do list for a really long time.
It's on Funimation's website, but Lord help you if you can get the player to work.
I may have to think. Oh, if it's on Funimation, they may let Crunchyroll stream it at some point in the future, and just subs, and that would work for me.
The dub in Wolf's Rain is one of the best dubs ever. So if you
I know, it's just like a cost issue for me because I'm already subscribed to Hulu and Crunchyroll, and that's kind of a big bill.
Oh, so I own Wolf's Rain on Blu-ray. I own the Bandai release, before it went when Bandai just went under, before their prices became a fortune. Thanks to Hardy, I got it from Right Stuff for a reasonable cost as a Hanukkah present, and I haven't looked back. It's a fantastic show. So,
I want me to get to my last pick?
Yeah.
This is probably the most obvious one, but Muramasa the Demon Blade.
Yeah. That's a Wii game, right?
Yeah, it was a game by Vanillaware, their second game after they released Odin Spear, because they also had Grim Grimoire on the PS2, which was a real-time strategy game for a console, and it was kind of a mess. It was sort of like Harry Potter with a time loop gimmick to it, and it was interesting, but it was also really unfun to play once the difficulty spiked up. Muramasa, though, is more in their action focus, and it's really heavily connected to Okami because they are both about Japanese folklore and creating stories based around that. Though I think this game goes a bit further because, Okami is very loose in what it's doing. It's very much the director Hideki Kiyama trying to make a fun action game out of these old stories and ideas, but Muramasa plays everything much closer to how they were, especially with the multiple endings, all not really giving a satisfying end to the whole thing, and just giving, okay, this happened, but what if this happened instead situations. And I actually kind of appreciate it now. Every single enemy and boss is some sort of god or demon from Japanese folklore. There's Onis going around. The Vita version had 4 different extra stories with different monsters, like a Nico Kama who had rage issues. I remember, they actually visually referenced a few famous artworks, that one you see everywhere of the waves going on in the ocean. Well, that's where they just happened to put an octopus boss battle. That was actually pretty cool. There's a lot of ghost stuff going on. I remember the final boss and the guy's main story was some sort of demon dog. I don't want to say Cerberus. It was something else.
I remember buying Muramasa the Demon Blade because it got a good review in Nintendo Power. To be honest, I was not that enthralled by Muramasa the Demon Blade. I kind of gave up after the first boss.
I would understand that because it's really fast paced and gets really difficult fast, and there's also the problem of all the backtracking. They do add in options to take taxis to certain areas, but it costs money and you want to use money on other stuff all the time, so I never used it and I kind of regret that.
Yeah, I also know, I hate to go actually on you for one tiny detail, but it's Hideki Kamiya.
Yeah, I am not good at pronouncing Japanese names.
Hideki Kamiya. I'm sure Hideki Kamiya would be kind of disappointed in you if you called him. What did you call him?
I don't remember. I think I pronounced his last name as Kamiya.
Yeah, Hideki Kamiya.
I don't know why I do that. I think I keep mixing up how his name is spelled out with the main character from Gurren Lagann. Because they pronounced his name in the dub for that, Kamiya, so I figured they're kind of spelled similar, but they may not be.
Well, we'll catch it when you edit it. You'll look back at this podcast and you're like, oh shoot.
I butcher Japanese names all the time on these podcasts, and my catchphrase at this point is like, I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Okay. So that's that part. I guess we talk about the actual thing now.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and get us into it.
All right. So just as an FYI, this is the first time doing this for me, so I'm a little new. Premise of Okami, and I don't want to overdo it because the last time I reviewed Okami on Screw Attack, I went way overboard with the story, but...
Oh god, remember when Screw Attack had blogging?
Yes, I do. So,
I checked in over there because I felt like doing like an indie game recommendation blog for a few, just to like get a few cool games out there. And then I looked at their blogging section, and it's just dead.
Yeah.
It's mostly just people writing life blog posts, and that's it.
The story of Okami is that there's this... It begins with a legend about this wolf named Shiranui, who's the goddess of the sun, and she's kind of seen as this enemy by the people of Kamiki village, who are constantly under attack every year by Orochi, who, every year on the night of a full moon, he requires a maiden sacrifice. When he finally goes to the village sake brewer, I think her name was Nami, right? Nami? Was it
I
Nami?
remember the swordsman was Nagi, but I'm not sure about...
I think it was Nami. So when Orochi takes Nami as his sacrifice, on the 100th year of the anniversary, Nagi, the village swordsman, goes to rescue her. And eventually the fight is interrupted by Shiranui, who gets Orochi's 8 heads drunk and defeats them one by one, and in the process of beating Orochi, dies. And is brought back to Kamiki village as a hero. 100 years pass, and the descendant of Nagi, Susano, goes to the shrine of Orochi and accidentally revives Orochi's dead spirit and creates a curse on the land of Nippon. And as a result of this, the tree sapling spirit, Sakuya, revives Shiranui in the form of a statue named Amaterasu. And Amaterasu teams up with a wandering artist, Ponko, named Issen, to go and purify the land. And from there, it unfolds as this sort of epic heroine's journey, traditional Japanese folktale-ish adventure series.
Yeah, like it starts with Orochi and then starts introducing more demons to deal with, like Ninetales, the 2 bird demons in the Land of Snow, Lichku and Nechku, and then finally revealing Yami, the god of darkness.
Yeah, Yami was an intense boss fight.
Oh, I should mention that Yami actually got reused for Capcom vs. Tatsunoko. He was the reason the events of those games ended up happening in the Worlds Met.
Interesting.
He's also the final boss of the campaign mode, and he's still pretty tough with multiple forms. It's weird he was used because Ami was in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, but not Capcom vs. Tatsunoko, which is confusing.
Interesting.
I mean, they did have another character from a Japanese folklore-focused Capcom game in there with Soki from like the 4th Onimusha game, but he still has nothing to do with Yami. It's very strange.
So, I will say, like, people have been talking about how Okami's story is so good. I wouldn't call it, like, amazing. It's good by video game standards, but I find the real pull in Okami is its characters, not its story.
Yeah, Kamiya is not really that good of a writer or, like, good at, like, creating a concept. Like, if you go back to the original Devil May Cry, it's kind of a big, pulpy mess. Just cut to that scene of him going, filling your dark soul with light. He plays very heavily into big moments and like fun characterization. So even when his plots are a complete disaster, like the entirety of Bayonetta, or pretty much or the first Devil May Cry, I don't think he really worked on the other ones. Weirdly, I checked around. He definitely wasn't director for 2 or 3 or 4. And of course, there's Beautiful Joe, which benefits from being so silly in general that his bad writing kind of brings a charm to it. But like in Okami, it's not a great story, it's just an effective story for getting the player involved in what's happening and like getting you to care about these characters. It's all very basic, very tropey, but there's nothing inherently wrong with any of it.
It's like I said in my piece on Infinite Rainy Day, the characters act with the illusion of agency.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I know that people always talk about how the worlds of like the Zelda franchise are so immersive, and they got those great stories. Characters are so interesting. I think with few exceptions, the Zelda universe is pretty standard and not really personally all that compelling. Okami's characters are really like very investing.
Yeah, I never really attached myself to many of the Zelda characters in the past. I've played a few of them, and just like very few of them ever hooked me. Majora's Mask and Wind Waker were all that really got me. But Wind Waker had the benefit of the art style pushing most of it, and like I can't remember the majority of the characters in that game, unlike Majora's Mask, which is like really benefited from the themes that were at work and how everyone kind of added to that theme. But everything else is just kind of a blur.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. It's actually one of the most frustrating games I've ever played. I've written about that before on Screw Attack twice, so hopefully one day I'll revisit that. But yeah.
I get it, because it's kind of frustrating doing all that work and just having to undo a lot of it to continue the game. Like, there is thematic reason that happens at times, but sometimes it just feels kind of like annoying.
Yeah, and Okami's characters don't need that time gimmick or anything like that. They just act on their own. Like Nagi and Susano, despite being two different people, they almost act like the same character. They're goofy, they're clumsy, they're not all that bright, and they have good hearts, and they end up being heroic in their own ways. Like, Nagi is just established as being heroic, but Susano redeems himself at the end.
Yeah, something I like is that Ami isn't really a character. She's a goddess of the sun in the world who's basically helping human beings realize their potential or help them in their moments of victory. Yeah, like, that's the entire point of Susanu's arc. Ami is there to give him that heroic deed he wants to accomplish.
Right, the push.
Yeah, just basically help him reach his victory. It sort of reminds me of like Greek myth, except the god is actually helping here instead of trying to manipulate everyone, and so they can possibly piss off like 7 other gods for fun.
Yeah, the Greek gods are jerks.
Every single one of them.
Yeah, one of my favorite characters in the Okami was Oki, who was the warrior from Webkir. I think it was Webkir.
Are you talking about the Iceland?
Yeah.
Oh, I wrote down the name of it. I think it's called Kamui.
Oh, Kamui, sorry. Kamui. So Kamui. Well, Northern Country Kamui is the region. Webkir is the village, I think.
Oh yeah, that would make more sense.
So, and Oki is from a tribe that's half human, half animal. And he's kind of like Susano if he were more arrogant, more competent, and more insecure about himself, because Oki's whole shtick is that he's trying to prove that he really is as great as everybody else says he is. And he takes the legendary sword, what's it called? The sword, what the name of the sword is.
I kind of forgot it too.
But he takes the legendary sword, which is forbidden, and he tries to activate it to fight off Orochi in the flashback sequence and rescue his, I think it's his sister, Lika? Was his sister, Lika?
Yeah, I remember sister. I remember that much.
Yeah, his little sister, Lika, and he doesn't work there But then he ends up going to fight Lechku and Nechku, and he realizes that selflessness is the key to activating the sword's powers. I think the sword's name is Katani, but whatever. So, and by the way, Lechku and Nechku fight is one of the best fights in the entire game.
It's kind of a shame because they're the least developed demons of all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just like two robot owl things flying around. You don't really get any context for what they are.
And you only fight them once. All the other major enemies in the game you fight more than once. Because at the end there's like a boss rush before the final boss.
Oh yeah, classic staple of the Clover sensibilities.
Yeah. It's also something that The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker also used, if you remember that.
Oh yeah, like when you had to keep refighting Dark Ganon, and there was those flashback battles with all the old bosses.
Yeah, so that's there. Speaking of which, can we address like an elephant in the room here?
Go for it.
So, I remember when I first heard about Okami, people were calling The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess a ripoff of Okami because of the whole wolf mechanic. So can we address the elephant in the room here that Okami rips off Zelda first?
Oh yeah, it absolutely does.
Because like, Hideki Kamiya has openly admitted that he took a lot of inspiration from the Zelda franchise. And having recently played The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, I can see a special acknowledgement from that game into Okami. Like, a lot of basic mechanics from when The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker go into Okami. So it's
yeah,
not
like the focus on wind.
The focus on wind, the fact that both Link and Amaterasu can't swim for long periods of time. The art style is very similar, at least in terms of they're both cel-shaded. So there are a lot of like touches there that are very similar. Speaking of which, like the art style in Okami is beautiful.
Oh yeah, it goes for like making like old. I don't want to say painting. It was wood block, old wood block print come alive.
Sumi-e, I think, is what it's called.
Yeah, it's a type of printing process.
Yeah, and it looks absolutely amazing. Like, even 11 years after the game came out and 3 ports, it still looks fantastic. You can admittedly see, like, the polygonal limitations, but who really cares?
I should mention that I've also played the sequel to this game, Okami-den, on the Nintendo DS, and they perfectly captured the style even with, like, the technical limitations on the DS. Actually, it might look better in some ways. Like the character design's much more inspired because the main character Chibirasu has 4 different partners, and they're all basically kids and with their own different themes and abilities. So the game is based heavily around making them all look very distinct and interesting. And I think it does a really good job of that.
Is Okami-den even good? Because I remember hearing Hideki Kamiya saying he wanted to make a proper sequel to Okami. I'm thinking to myself, Okami-den wasn't a sequel.
Oh, he probably doesn't really have many thoughts on the game. It's very good, especially for the system it was made on. The amount of things they managed to accomplish on a Nintendo DS is astounding. Like, the entire original world map from the first game is here. You can travel it like you always did. Some of the dungeons do suffer a little because because of the technical limitations, there's some black void area you can't really ignore, but otherwise everything like goes really well. They make up for the lack of 3D controls with like more puzzles and different combat abilities, and the celestial brush stuff is much more improved and involved.
Okay.
Like, even like especially with all the 4 partners, they each have a different their own different attack abilities, and you can use them with the celestial brush for different effects. Like, there's one kid who's like has a cooking pot theme, and he's usually on fire, so you can use him to use fire attacks on other enemies. There's a mermaid character with a water theme with a similar power, and so forth.
Okay. I mean, like, I've heard mixed things about Okami-den, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it's not as good as the first one, but the fact that it's so good with all the restrictions placed on it is really impressive.
Okay.
I would definitely recommend it.
Unfortunately, there aren't any DS games available in stores anymore, so...
Yeah, I would just like go on eBay. You can probably find it pretty cheap.
Yeah. So on the style of the art style, I think the art really gets to show off the best when you rejuvenate the trees.
Yeah, whenever you walk around at like full health, you have if you go fast enough, there's like a trail of flowers going behind you, and as you revitalize the world with a simple brush stroke, you bring trees back to life, and eventually, at a certain point, the entire land will explode in this entire rejuvenation of nature, and it's just beautiful to see in action.
Yeah. It has the different songs that play as well, that are very uplifting and inspiring.
Yeah, the entire soundtrack is like masterful for this game.
The score, you mean? Soundtrack. I should actually point out, because people get this, I say this all the time, but a soundtrack is a music with actual words to it. A score is non-vocal music.
And it's just kind of harder. I guess an OST would be more accurate, because it's an original soundtrack, because it's kind of hard to like label a lot of this music the way like Japanese games and anime use music in their media. Like for a lot of anime, they just make stuff ahead of time, and then it's up to the director to decide what gets used when. Yeah,
it's also the thing I like about the rejuvenation pieces is that they're all slightly different depending on where you are. I mean, there are tracks that get used a lot, reused. But like for example, in Kamigi Village, the piece is different than in like Ryoshima Coast and Shinshu Fields, and then Northern Kamui Village has its own like darker, more chilling version of that. So there are differences in the different tunes, and I actually like how even in the overworld themes, the overworld have different themes that slightly vary depending on where you are, which I think again is something that Zelda games could definitely stand to cue from.
The only problem I had was like the main battle themes were kind of boring.
They are kind of boring.
Except for like some of the boss battle themes, but like the only one that really pops of those is the sun rises at the very end.
Really? Because
I
like Yushiwaka's battle theme a lot. I actually like Yushiwaka's theme in general.
For me, like a boss theme needs to really stick out against like the rest of the soundtrack, and that doesn't really happen much in Okami until the final battle, for me at least.
By the way, while we're here, I have two questions to ask you.
Okay.
So, the first one is favorite overworld theme, and the second one is favorite theme in general.
Favorite theme in general is, like, definitely the sun rises, because it gets pretty much the entire game score into one really rousing track. But as far as, like, a favorite overworld theme, it's been a while. Like, the only thing that's really popping in my head right now is the theme that plays when the mayor is, like, doing that dance at the big tree in the first village.
Oh, the break dance?
Yeah, that was a very weird moment that stuck with me.
Yeah. So my favorite overall theme in general is Waka's theme.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Because I think it was Chica Conroy had called him like this game's version of the Doctor from Doctor Who, because he speaks French and he's very mischievous and he's mysterious and he plays musical instruments and he has swords. He's a time traveler. But yeah, I like that. But my favorite overworld theme is honestly, in terms of catchiness, it's Shinshu Fields. Like I used to love Ryoshima Coast more because Ryoshima Coast is more triumphant. But Shinshu Fields is the one I keep coming back to.
I remember there was a lot of good pieces just used for some dramatic moments, like when you're taking the winemaker to Orochi's palace. Like, that one sticks out in my head.
Yeah.
There's a lot more. There's a lot of moments like that in this game that I often don't see in a lot of games, because most game composition, and like in Japan at least, is based around just similar to what I described for anime, make a bunch of tracks and use them as you see fit. But Okami is a bit more theatrical in its design, like sort of like some Final Fantasy games were at the time, like Final Fantasy X and so forth. So there's some themes that are just made for a certain moment.
Yeah, so it's I remember Sideways had done a video on the theme to Wonder Woman, the new Wonder Woman movie, which, by the way, I totally recommend. It's great. But he mentions how like they had to score thematic moments as opposed to character moments that just happen to fit characters. Okami is similar. Like, for example, Susano has his own theme, Oki has his own theme, Waka has his own theme, Rao, the demon fox sorceress, has her own theme, which is actually kind of like, like erotic in a way. It's almost kind of weirdly erotic. Rao's theme. The one who turns out to be the demon fox.
Yeah, I remember her.
Yeah, so her theme is kind of like when you hear her theme, it's almost like you want to throw like $5.95 at her, $5.95 at her. And you're like, okay, take me back to my shed and do you know what? It's really weird, but, and I'm not saying that because I think I'm trying to shame her, but it just the game almost kind of makes you feel like that.
The thing about Kamiya is that he's infamously horny. I read an interview he did with like Electronic Gaming Monthly a few years back when Bayonetta was first starting to get waves in the gaming press, and he described how he came up with some of these game ideas. Like with Devil May Cry, it was coolness. With Beautiful Joe, it was beauty. And with like Bayonetta, it was sexiness. And for Okami, he just wanted to make a game with a dog.
Yeah, I mean, like, at least he's honest about it.
Oh yeah, he's very honest about how much he's in the woman's hair. Oh yeah, I just remembered that Sakuya. One thing I remember very early when I started playing this game was there's a single moment in the game where you can see behind Sakuya and she has a butt window on her dress.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Kamiya, all right.
I think the one weird part is when you're doing the rejuvenation for Kamiya Guardian Sapling, and you're doing the Konohana shuffle. And by the way, that we'll get more on the controls for that later. But I know that you and I disagree on how the controls work for the different consoles. But when you finally rejuvenate the tree and Sakuya comes out in like a scantily clad bikini, that was kind of like really jarring.
Yeah, I can see why he would do that. Just because.
But yeah, like all the female characters in Okami who are of age, like Kamiya is a pervert, but he's not a pedophile. He's a pervert, but he's not a pedophile. All the characters who are of age have like voluptuous breasts and really defined asses.
Yeah, he's not subtle about it.
No, except for Ami. Ami is just a wolf.
Yep.
And although, to be honest, Issun's pervy behavior hasn't aged very well in light of the recent sex scandals in Hollywood and whatnot.
I'm willing to forgive him because, like, he actually works with women on a lot of his projects. Like, Bayonetta wasn't just his design. The reason Bayonetta came out the way she did was because he hired a woman to design her for him, and she put in a lot of her own ideas and kinks into the design to create this strong, sexually dominant character.
A dominatrix?
Not necessarily dominatrix, but sexually dominant. Sorry. It's very interesting because, like, Kamina is into one thing, but he doesn't seem to, like, hoard it over everyone. Like, he'll insert a little stuff for him in there, but there's a lot of hands in the pie, and everyone gets to add something to it.
Yeah. But even so, I still think that Issun's pervy stuff hasn't aged very well compared to other.
Yeah, that's fair enough, especially in this game where it usually just feels kind of weirdly out of place.
Yeah, but while we're on the subject of like the sprouts, I remember you had mentioned in a review back on Screw Attack about how you had tried out the Wii version of Okami and you were not impressed.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of like the motion controls in most games because few games know how to do it. Like, the best bit of motion control I've ever felt in a game was playing Marvel Ultimate Alliance on the Wii, and then I realized I could just slightly tip my nunchuck and the camera would turn with it. I was like, wow, that is the greatest thing ever. And that was the only time motion controls ever like wowed me. Like Okami, it wasn't made with motion controls in mind originally. So when I tried doing celestial brushstrokes with it, because the strokes had to be so precise and the motion controls weren't really there yet at the time, I never got used to it.
So I'm going to defend the controls a little bit. Okami came out on the Wii in 2008, and for the most part, it's a pretty fluid translation. I'm sure you'd agree with that. It's pretty fluid for the most part. But what had happened was Wii Motion Plus did not come out until 2009 with like Red Steel 2. It was like one of the first games to use it.
I remember that.
Which, by the way, Red Steel 2's Motion Plus was great.
I've heard really good things about that game, and I've considered getting it, but first I have to get Wii Motion Plus. It's
an add-on that's like $20 or something like that. But and I think future Wiimotes came bundled with Motion Plus or something like that. So whatever. But the point is that Okami came out in 2008 when most developers were still not sure of how to like really, program for the Wii. And for the most part, it's fine, but I think that Okami could have really benefited from the Motion Plus add-on, because there are definitely moments. I don't think that the controls in Okami are broken. I think for the most part they're very fluid, but you have to get used to the fact that it's very sensitive.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a similar issue with like the DualShock controls, but because I was so used to using those joysticks and the game is so lenient on letting you learn the controls early on, that I got used to making the motions with the joysticks pretty quickly.
I've also heard, I know that Megan had been playing Okami, and she mentioned in one of our chats that she was, if you don't mind me mentioning this, Megan, I hope you don't, that she had tried playing Okami on the PS2, but got stuck because the brush controls were so stiff. So I guess it depends on which of the two evils do you prefer. Fluid controls on the PS2 that are stiff, or flexible controls on the Wii that are very loose.
Yeah, the Celestial Brush definitely benefits from just kind of pausing the game for a while so you can do the stroke, because if it didn't, it would be hell to play. This is the one area Okami Den just massively improves on everything, because the touchpad is absolutely perfect for this type of control scheme. The only downside is because the screen is smaller, it's sometimes kind of awkward to get things that are on the edge of the screen within the stroke, but it's not a game breaker.
So, the Wii controls were only an issue for me. Like, just to let you know, when I was playing, I beat Okami in about a week when I played it recently, and I was playing it for like 5-6 hours on end. I would be up until like 2 o'clock in the morning playing it.
Yeah, I had a similar reaction to it, which is weird because I normally hate games like this, like puzzle dungeons and stuff, but I never really got tired of it.
I would actually go up to bed at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'd have to be quiet so that my parents wouldn't complain that I'm keeping them awake.
One benefit I think Okami has over most of the Zelda series is that it's actually has pacing. Like, the Zelda games will go on for long stretches of nothing of significance happening, or if something of significance happens, it doesn't feel significant yet, so it's hard for you to get invested. So, like, if you don't get into the puzzles in the dungeon and the fairly unsatisfying combat, you'll probably get bored, but Okami has so many other things for you to do that are more involved than usual and have like the more rewarding combat that it never really has that issue.
Yeah. So anyway, as I was saying, I would play it for long stretches of time, and my hands would get sweaty. And when you're trying to do like the Konohana shuffle or some basic the mini games, those really annoying mini games underground where you're trying to dig up water, when your hands are sweaty, it makes it harder for you to be accurate, and that was frustrating. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about there. When your hands are sweaty, controls are always annoying.
Yeah, I kind of get that. I've never really had that problem much. Most of my worst control problems have arisen from a game being fundamentally broken, and this is where I bring up the Hulk Ultimate Destruction on the PS2 for the millionth time.
But when my hands are sweaty, it's harder for me to control. Plus, I'm tired. It's late. I don't want to like yell so that everybody wakes up. But yeah, it can be a little frustrating because I mean, like, I have my own personal shtick that I won't get into, but I find that when I'm playing video games and I'm really into them, then the entire rest of the world is dead to me. I can play for hours on end, and sometimes I have to stop myself because it's not healthy. But like, I was playing Okami for like 5-6 hours in a row straight.
Yeah, for me, I usually just find if it's like a story-heavy one, and for me it always is a story-heavy one, I just find a good break point.
I don't have that control, that self-control, unfortunately.
I kind of had to learn it myself. I would go on some JRPGs, I would never stop playing them for hours on end. The Tale series was a big cause of that.
But like, I guess my parents were more forgiving because I was playing Okami for this. But still, like, I'm sorry to my parents who constantly put up with me being up late at night whenever I'm, busy playing games that I'm really into.
I found the best solution for me is just to go to bed early, like around 9 or so, maybe 8 if you're not really feeling like doing anything, and then wake up around like 3 or 4, maybe 5 if you need some extra sleep, and then get stuff done in the morning.
Oh, I'm not that disciplined.
Well, I had to learn the discipline because we have like 5 dogs in this house now, and one of them will eventually wake us up around 4 in the morning, so.
Okay, yeah.
Rescue work really makes you change your schedule.
Yeah, I can see that. I actually have a new job coming up, so I have to learn to adjust my schedule.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Thank you. So, like, I just asked that question. Like, what did you think of those mini games with the well digging?
Honestly, I don't really have much recollection of the mini games in Okami. Like, none of them really stuck out to me as bad. I'm not sure any mini games in a video game have ever really stuck out to me as bad. They're usually a nice distraction. I'm trying to think of one that really bugged me, but I'm mostly drawing blanks.
Yeah, I hated those mini games.
I'm sure if I think hard enough, there's probably one in a Zelda game that kind of pissed me off.
The Triforce Shard stuff was really annoying. Collecting the Triforce Shard.
Oh, the Triforce stuff in any Zelda game is always annoying. Oh yeah, the Wind Waker, when you have to collect all those Triforce pieces, where they basically just ran out of ideas and had to put some extra meat in the game. If I didn't have a strategy guide with me when I played that game, I probably would have lost my mind.
Same. So, those mini games, basically the whole objective of the mini games is that you're underground and you're digging to the bottom of a well to help somebody find like a location to create water.
Yeah, like make a hot spring.
Yeah, there are 4 of them. I think 1 or 2 of them are optional, but the one that's not optional for sure is Kaguya's ship, which was what I brought up with the Tale of the Princess Kaguya earlier. But Kaguya and those mini games are so annoying because you're given time limits. And the time limits don't stop when you have to like draw stuff with your brush. But it's the one moment where the person that you're trying to navigate down to the bottom is wickedly incompetent. And you are, like trying to navigate the person to the destination. And I just got really pissed off by those.
It's kind of the opposite situation in Okami then, where your partners are usually really competent and you can't really get anywhere without them.
Yeah, it's just kind of annoying in that regard. But fortunately, they're not a deal breaker. I think what's really nice about Okami is the game works on an idea of a subtle idea of integrating environmentalism in through praise. When you do certain objectives, when you clear purified area, when you purify cursed areas, when you feed animals food and whatnot, when you talk to people and complete certain objectives, you get praise. And the praise can be used to level your character up.
Yeah, because Ami is a god and needs the faith of the people. It's even like the key to defeating Yami at the end when Ishin finally accepts his role as a celestial envoy and spreads the word.
Yeah, it's the ending with Ishin is kind of like preachy and heavy-handed a little bit, and it's one of those gag me with a spoon kind of moments. But it's sweet. It works.
It's absolutely earned by that point in the game.
I know, but it's still kind of hokey and heavy-handed.
Yeah, it just, like, if they tried playing that card earlier in, the Orochi segment, it would have not worked, but after so much time spent with him, they earned the moment to actually just be that cheesy and sincere. There's always a time and place, and this game understands that really well.
Yeah, and the music they play in that one track, in that one moment, Reset Thank You, I think it's called. It's beautiful. It's just a shame that the Wii version of the game doesn't have the end credits song.
It's also kind of a shame the Wii version of the game has the IGN watermark logo on the cover.
Yes.
Fantastic.
I don't think that was on purpose, but whatever.
I'm still not over that someone just like apparently stole some art from IGN instead of like using actual art they own at Capcom for this new cover.
But either way, like, I guess the one last thing I'll talk about is well, actually we'll talk about, I guess, two other things. Like, one of them being the combat, which I think is both a blessing and a curse depending on how tired you are at night. Because in Zelda games you can avoid combat. In Okami, you can't really avoid combat. Once you're in a combat zone, you're locked with your opponents until you beat them. So it can be a blessing if it means like you have to, you know who you're fighting. But it can be a curse if you're tired, or if you just discover an enemy and you're like, oh crap, I gotta fight this thing. I don't want to fight this thing. I gotta fight this thing. I don't want to fight this thing. Some of the enemies are even unavoidable.
Yeah, a big difference between Zelda and Okami is Zelda, you're always in the world, and like everything you fight in the world, you basically just fight as normal. But in Okami, there are little like possessed scrolls wandering around, and if you run into one, you end up having to fight a set of enemies in like a random encounter sort of situation. And you have like all the Kamiya staples like a fast dodge, some basic attacks, comboing. You can use some of your Celestial Brush powers, but your ink is limited.
Those Celestial Brush powers, unlocking all 13 of them is actually really fun.
Oh yeah, there's some cool stuff you can do with them, but it takes a while to get there.
You have to unlock, you find these constellations, and what you do with the constellations is you fill them in with stars, and then they give you the 13 animals of the zodiac, minus the dog, because Ami is the dog, plus the cat, because why not?
I'm trying to remember if the cat was in Okami Den. Because in Okami Den, all of those celestial animals have kids now, and when you do the constellations, their kids come out instead.
Interesting.
It's just a cute way to add more character to the game.
Yeah, so I like all the different brush techniques, and I think the fun part about the game is that, one, the brush techniques kind of work as similarly to like the dungeon items that you find in Zelda games. You need these items to beat the bosses. And two, that when you're fighting Yami, you lose all your powers, and you have to slowly gain them back, which kind of is like it can be a little frustrating, but it just it helps keep things in check, so it keeps the boss more exciting, because you can't, like, for example, you can't use Power Slash at the beginning of Yami. You have to get it back.
It also has you test out your understanding of the basics of combat.
Right. It's a recap. Yami is just a fun boss in general, even though he's really hard.
Yeah, something I like is that you can actually like learn new moves from like the dojos around the area.
Yeah, and you need some of them too.
Oh yeah, the dojo guys all do beautiful Joe poses, which is great.
Yeah. And I guess also the last point that I would like to bring up, I don't know if you have anything else to add after this, is the overworlds are a lot of fun. They're more linear, and so the dungeons are also, puzzles are also a lot more linear, and they don't rely on past franchise knowledge, which I don't like, because, you know, like Zelda games tend to rely on past franchise knowledge for a lot of their puzzles, but the game is very linear, it's very straightforward, and as a result, I've only ever needed help like once or twice to just get past a really obvious puzzle. I could figure out everything on my own, which was great, because I'm terrible at video games.
I was surprised by how much I could get through Okami without like a walkthrough or anything, which is refreshing.
Yeah, Okami is not a hard game at all. It's not like a cakewalk. I know people who have complained that it's too easy, but honestly, like, one of the things about the Zelda games is I find they're meant to be really frustrating sometimes. Even the easier Zelda games are really frustrating. I don't know about you.
Oh, I kind of have the same feeling. The only Zelda game I genuinely like still is Link's Awakening. And like, I know it has problems, but it's the only one that really felt like to me it wasn't like screwing around with me or taking forever to get to the points or just throwing a bunch of random crap my way. I genuinely loathed what I played of Twilight Princess, especially the 7-hour long tutorial where people won't stop telling you basic controls and break your immersion. I know what Z targeting is, thank you.
I happen to like Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, but that's a different story altogether. But I also like that Amy can jump, and not just like just like in the sense like Link can jump if you go over a cliff, but Amy can jump on command, which is great because there are a lot of platforming sections in Okami that require jumping.
That was such a brilliant addition, and I'm surprised jumping isn't a more common thing in the Zelda series.
Do you have anything else to mention that I haven't brought up?
There's honestly not much else I want to add other than I would highly recommend Okami Den because it is a surprisingly good game for what they had to work with that technology. And I would like to see a sequel to this one day, but I know Capcom's not going to do it unless Kamiya's around and he's busy with Platinum right now.
I think that Kamiya said he wanted to make a sequel to it.
He does, but he needs permission from Capcom, and it's probably not going to happen right now. I think they're going to be more busy, like working with Yoko Taro since A Nier Automata was such a surprise hit. Maybe try to... I think they were banking on more Metal Gear Rising, but Konami's change in direction has pretty much made that moot, even though that game was such a surprising hit for them.
Konami's working on pachinko machines now.
Yeah, they seem to have lost all interest in games besides a yearly soccer release.
Yeah, and I guess the one last point that I will mention, seeing as I did want to mention it before, is people have been talking about how like Okami is super underrated and whatnot. I don't think it's underrated at all. It might be an overlooked gem, but the game has had and the game hasn't like sold super amazingly, but it had a PS2 game in 2006, a Wii port in 2008, a PS3 port in 2012, and it's being released now on the PS4, Xbox One, and Windows PC this year. Like I think it's coming out in a few weeks on as of recording this in time for the Christmas release. So it's not really underrated, it's more overlooked.
I hope that means they're going to do a remastering port of Okami Den because that's really a game that deserves to be played more.
Yeah. So, final thoughts?
Okami really stands up. It was really impressive then and still really impressive now. It's not like thematically mind-blowing or anything, but there are few people in like the Japanese game industry these days who constantly make games of like this classic design so well that fits so well with modern sensibilities. Like Okami looks at everything Zelda does wrong and fixes it, and it really feels like the Zelda game I always wanted but can never have for so long.
So I know we're talking a lot about Okami and it can kind of tire people out, but if there's one thing you can take from this conversation is that Okami really is that good. Like, if Bob Chipman had done a really that good on video games, he probably could cover Okami and get a lot of material to talk about it. It really is that good. Okami is fun, it's engaging, and as somebody who's not even really a Zelda fan, I can get into this. I've played it. It's the only Zelda-like game I've come back to, and that's saying a lot.
I think the best praise I can give it is mention that when you finished the first Orochi part, I thought that was the end of the game, and then when I found out there was more of it, instead of being tired that there was more game like I usually am, I was like, all right, more game.
Yeah, I mean, just as a note, you fight Orochi 3 times.
Oh yeah, you fight him a lot.
Yeah. It's just a fun game, although, to be honest, I still haven't completed all the beads, the 100 beads quest. That I haven't done. Yeah, there are 100 beads in the entire game, and you're supposed to get like a reward at the end. I can't get all of them. I've looked online, and I still haven't found all of them yet. I'm like, so that's where that one was. So that's where that one was. So why didn't I find that one before? But yeah, the 100 beads quest is definitely going to keep gamer is busy, and especially considering that I didn't realize you can actually warp to different locations in the overworld by going to one of those save mirrors and doing a special brush technique. I didn't know about that. I was just busy using mermaid coins all the time. Yeah. So, I guess overall thoughts were covered. I definitely would consider this a 10 out of 10 game. It's a masterpiece.
I don't do ratings anymore, but I would be more like in like a 9.10 range if I did.
Yeah. It's definitely a masterpiece in its own right.
Yeah, this is like how Devil May Cry 3 was a mechanical masterpiece and God Hand was more like a design masterpiece. This would be like a masterpiece in terms of combining what works of old school design and new school sensibilities into something most anyone can enjoy.
Plus, it's a funny game too.
Yeah, this is like the type of game that, like, when someone makes a game that anyone can enjoy, they usually don't know how to go about it, but this just happened because one guy and a few other developers just did the stuff they wanted to do and it worked out. It just goes to show that sometimes all you need is mastery of a craft instead of like trying to meet all these different expectations, and the end result will stand on its own.
And I mean, it's always a gamble because very often tour projects are failures because the people working either don't know how to do them or they're so focused on the passion they forget to make something that holds up. This is one of those examples of an auteur project that actually worked out.
Yeah, Kamina is a very meat and potatoes guy, so when he wants to do a passion project, it's fairly basic on one level, but it gets like everything so mechanically correct that it's hard not to be impressed.
Alright, so I guess that's about it for now, right?
Yeah, we'll have another rainy day chat episode whenever someone on staff decides to make one, and I don't know if I'll be a part of it or not, but I will definitely be editing it. We'll see you next time, and hopefully Heavy Storms will be out sooner than later. I still got to figure that one out.
Alright, see you later.